Okay, guys, we are in week 4 and we're also in module 4, so we're more than halfway done with the class, which is great. I apologize if this recording isn't super great. I'm kind of losing my voice, so bear with me and hopefully we'll get through the next 10 or 15 minutes or so of the recording. But for module 4, we're going to be covering chapter 7 and chapter 8. Chapter 7 deals with liking, love, and other close relationships. And then chapter 8 is all about social influence. So let's take a look here. You've got your to-do list as usual. We'll cover chapter 7 first. So we're going to be taking a look at all of the elements that go into what's called affiliation, which is basically our wanting to be liked and accepted and a part of other people and having relationships with other people. So to affiliate really means to want to be close to others. So we can look at this, and we will, in the context of close personal relationships, friendships, family, as well as more intimate relationships where attraction is concerned. So we'll be taking a look at some of the key research that tells us why people affiliate and how, who we are drawn to. So the concepts are going to cover elements that have been backed by research to show why people have this sort of innate need to want to affiliate. And as we're going about navigating our social relationships, how do we make choices about who we want to be friends with or who we're attracted to? How much control do we have over those choices? So, are these conscious choices we make, or are there elements about it that are subconscious that sort of happen out of elements of learning? So operant conditioning and classical conditioning, are we conditioned to affiliate in certain ways? Does our environment promote that? And then genetically, if we look at it from like an evolutionary perspective, what makes sense in terms of who we want to be close to and why? So we're going to be taking a look at all of the research behind all of that, and we'll be getting into physical attractiveness and elements of that, which are not only important for more romantic relationships, but even just friendships. We actually do base our friendships on elements of physical attractiveness, believe it or not. So you're going to be taking a look at some of the studies that have been done in that area, and you'll take a look at some common myths. Do opposites attract? If so, why? And in what ways do opposites actually work? Because the idea of opposites attracting sounds kind of counterintuitive, like you would be fighting all the time. It can work, but it depends on in what ways are you opposite. Is the opposite complementary or is it combative? If we're combative opposites, it's not going to work very well. But if we can complement one another, it might actually work to our advantage. So we'll take a look at some different hypotheses and theories based on how we go about forming relationships. We'll also take a look at a lot of familial relationships, so parent-child and sibling. And this is where we get into a little bit of the research on attachment. So if you've taken child development and of course intro psych, you're probably familiar with attachment, and how we attach with our parents at a young age says a lot for how we form friendships later in life. The attachment with our parents definitely forms the foundation for how we affiliate and attach with other friends. So we'll take a look at the nature of close friendships, so same sex, opposite sex friendships, and then we'll kind of dive into more of the passionate love. We'll be looking at Sternberg's model of love, who has been the foremost person researching this area of what types of love relationships exist, which ones are good, which ones are not good, which ones are going to go the long haul. So, which models of love will have longevity and which ones might burn out. Okay. So that pretty much covers chapter 7. And then chapter 8 is a little bit of a divergence from that field. It's looking at how we are influenced by others. So it's actually going to piggyback a little bit on some of the earlier chapters we covered, chapter 2 and 3. So social cognition and social perception, as well as the self. So it's going to look at some key areas, and I have it written here in Objective 1. Differences between conformity, compliance, obedience, and symbolic social influence. Those are the 4 key areas when it comes to social influence. We conform to others and to behavior around us when we live in a society. That's a natural phenomenon, and there's reasons why we choose to conform, reasons why we have to conform. And this can be a powerful influence on our behavior. Sometimes we conform and we don't even realize that we're doing it or why. But then there's also compliance. So going along with a request, basically. So someone's asked you to do something, and how likely you are to go along with it is going to rely on several factors of the social environment. And then obedience is complying, so it's compliance with a direct command or a direct request. And obedience comes in many forms, but we typically look at it in terms of obedience in a workplace setting, or obedience in a parent-child interaction, or in the military, obedience with a commanding officer. And these can be powerful dynamics that can influence our behavior. And then symbolic social influence is basically kind of combining a little bit of all of those, but looking at how, we don't act in a bubble. There are many different factors at play, and how we are influenced, how we are swayed. And so this is a very popular area in marketing and business and advertising. So taking a look at how we can get people to do what we want, or buy a product that we want them to, or vote in a certain way. So all of those behaviors, voting, buying, consumerism, are influenced, and that has a lot to do with then the outcome. So we're going to be taking a look at some really classic research in the area of social psychology, and this chapter, I would say, is really how social psychology got its start. It's from people like Solomon Asch and Stanley Milgram, who really did some pivotal studies, slightly unethical in the Milgram case, that just blew people away in terms of the findings. Really shocked people, and no pun intended, with the Milgram study, at why people would comply or obey in certain situations where it seemed obvious to an onlooker what should be done, but wasn't. But we'll also be looking at principles of compliance, so just how we can sort of sway and influence other people. So Robert Cialdini is a big name here, and he talks about how you can kind of get people to do what you want. I would say his books are like a foundation or premise of every single business class or marketing class that you might take. So this is just an area that's very applicable to other arenas outside of psychology. So this is going to be a chapter that's super important for criminal justice, education, again, business and marketing. So I think you guys are going to get a lot out of this chapter. And I think you're going to find it pretty interesting. Again, it was what really started the field. So here are your lecture slides for Chapter 7 and Chapter 8. And then you have the module article readings for Module 4. So we have Article 19 and Article 26, and those are going to be part of the discussion questions again this week. And then I've included some additional videos. Now again, you should be watching the videos in Revel that are embedded in the reading in the e-text, because there's really some great videos that expand upon important concepts, but I try to throw in a few extras that I think are important. Here we have one of breaking a social norm. So it's a campaign that was launched a while back, doing something very benign, giving out hugs. And you can see in the video how it was banned and what people did about it, because it really was just going against a social norm, which is being very, huggy. In our society, we don't get touchy-feely. We're not a close kind of touchy society like maybe in Europe, where people greet each other with a kiss on each cheek. We don't really do that here. So being a person that hugs a lot is sort of breaking a social norm. And you can think about maybe extrapolate on how many other ways do we break social norms, maybe even every day, by going against the grain of culture. The second video deals with emotional branding. This comes from a PBS Frontline special, and it looks at marketing techniques, and it looks at business and how big name brands make their way in the market, how they tie their brand to an emotion. And when they tie their brand to an emotion, it elicits an emotional response to that product. So we'll look at how this is used in marketing efforts here in America. And then, of course, we're going to take a look at Ash's conformity experiment. This is the original experiment performed by Solomon Asch, talking about conformity. So use these questions that I give you to kind of guide. As you're watching the video, you kind of know what to be looking for. That's why I put those there. And then you'll be looking at more on conformity and how we conform. And there's different types of conformity. There's private and public conformity. It doesn't look the same. And you're going to be watching pretty much the first half of this video. The second half deals with groupthink, and we're going to be looking at it later in the class when we talk about group behavior. It is tied to conformity in that it is an outpouring of conformity. But for the sake of this module, you just want to be watching the first half, and you'll know when they're done talking about conformity and they start talking about groupthink. Then you're going to take a look at a modern day take on the Milgram study done by Jerry Berger. He recreated the Milgram shock experiment study, and you'll see what differences existed. He included women, which Milgram did not, and there's some interesting findings there. I believe it's also in Revel, this video, but I don't think they showed the entire video. So I've given it to you here. This is definitely going to be necessary for the discussion this week. You'll want to reference that. And then lastly, the Abu Ghraib prison study. So this is kind of like what would happen in an applied setting if people obeyed to the extreme extent, even when it went against their better judgment. So it gives you a little idea there. You have your discussion and your exam. Again, the discussion is really, you want to be integrating in the articles as well as the chapter readings. So every opportunity you can to tie in concepts from chapter 7 here and concepts from chapter 8 here is going to benefit you and get you the most points on those discussions. That pretty much rounds it up for the module. Please let me know, though, if you have any questions. Please email me, and have a good week, everybody.